Welcome to the fourth episode of the Pure Infrastructure Podcast. It's a podcast that's done in collaboration with VMware. For this episode, we are honored to have Alex Karanja, who's the head of digital transformation at Naivas Supermarkets, which is one of the largest, if not the largest retailer in Kenya. I've known Alex for quite a while. I think it's 13 years now.
Yes.
So just to get us started, just give us a background on who you are, your background, and how you ended up in tech.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It's quite an honor. I don't think I've been on a podcast before, so thanks. Yes, I've known Faris for quite a long time. I think in different parts of my career or different companies we've worked in different engagements. As I said, I am the digital head, or rather head of digital transformation at Naivas. I guess by way of background, I've been a techie for the better part of my life. I went to School of Computing in the University of Nairobi. I think that's the formal training that I got on that. And funny thing is, I think when I finished high school, I went to the Great High School because we at the time lived in Waithaka. We used to say we live in a village in Nairobi, so it's in Dagreti, and the Great High School was quite close to us. That's where I went to high school. Looking back, it's a fantastic experience. It gives you a balance of many things. But when I finished high school, I think one of the things when you're looking for a career, I had really wanted to do architecture. Surprisingly, I liked the technical drawing, the aspects of things like that, and my father really wanted me to do medicine. So I think when I actually did pass in specific subjects, the physics, the biology, so it was quite a debate. But on the day I went to register for campus, I happened to fill in that I wanted to do computers. At the time, I think it was just technical computers. And I got called in for computer science. So I decided, fate would have it. And I got into that career in University of Nairobi and was, I think, one, if not the third year in the School of Computing. And it was a quite, I think, set ways now into my journey. And I've been in computers and tech ever since. More so now, my first job, I did consulting a bit, actually for the UNDP Somalia, right out of campus. So we did quite a bit of, it taught me a lot in terms of business applications within a normal business environment, which was quite ad hoc at the time because it was UNDP Somalia who were operating from here. And really their target was Somalia. But building from that, I joined a company called Impacts Business Solutions, I think is where we met. And it really gave me a big exposure to the big corporates, the banks, the big insurance firms. And also from an angle where I wasn't an employee, I was coming in to problem solve. So a lot of the time we did CRM solutions where you'd come in and figure out what is the problem, what is the bug that they're having, and implement an enterprise solution. And I think based on that is when I landed into Naivas.
Okay, so you've sort of been on both ends of the spectrum. So initially you started designing customer CRMs. I remember Impacts for the asset tagging systems, because sort of like all those barcodes you'd find in Coca-Cola fridges, I discovered was Impacts' work. So I'm guessing you were involved. But you've moved from that to now running IT for one sort of organization. How do you connect the dots? Like, how does the past shape who you are today? Like, how did that experience feed
Actually,
into
it's
Naivas?
an interesting story because once, a few years into Naivas, when we were doing projects with other consulting companies, when I told them, I moved from consultancy into formal employment at a retail supermarket, they're like, why? Usually it's the other way around. So the way I joined Naivas is at Impacts, we implemented an ERP solution for Naivas over a couple of time. It was quite a long period because there were a lot of changes to be done. And once the system was up and running, happened to be at a point where I was leaving Naivas to join something else. So I joined a legal firm. They're called ALN now, formerly Anjawala. They had a big stretch. They were stretching out their legal firm across Africa. So there was a project to do a lot of business process innovations across that. And that really appealed to me at the time. So I actually was at that project. It was supposed to be a year-long project. And optimistically, we were done in about 9 months. So at that point, Naivas was having a challenge with their systems based on the implementation we had done. Now, this was maybe 2-3 years after we had finished, and there was normal support, but not. So based on my relationships with the operation management, they reached out and said, Alex, we have ABCD problem. You come in, lead the current team, impart the knowledge of the system to the current team, lead the current team, and solve the problem that we have. Yeah. So I ended up getting employed in Naivas because their structures really wouldn't allow me to be a consultant at that point. But once I joined, because I think based on my career with Impacts and going into banks and insurance firms and coming back now to the retailer, I think I've always been sort of a guy of on problem. Yeah. So we really attacked whatever was the current challenge. Yeah. And we came to a point where now those improvements, systems are running, things are flowing a bit better. Yeah. And progressively, the company started more or less growing, started expanding quite right. So there was always a bit more work to be done. Yeah. So lo and behold, you look at yourself 3-4 years. I was coming to do this for a year. 3-4 years later, we are running a big enterprise in IT, and you're like, okay, fine. Yeah. There's always a challenge that's coming up, and it was a welcome challenge. So I stayed. Okay. And I think it has transformed over the years into different things. Different units have taken up different things, and the challenges of the market have come in, and we are now the biggest retailer. Yeah. And the scope of it actually, you wake up and you realize, wow, we are this big. Yeah. But the innovations are still there. Yeah. So the challenge is still there. Okay. Wow. Yeah. And you've been there for 7 years or 8? Yes, I've been there. This is my 7th year. Yeah. I think the titles I've only held maybe like 3, but the actual work has really transformed along the way. Okay. So then just give us a background on Naivas, because just for people who are not familiar with it, and also what your experience has been. You've touched on it slightly, but Naivas evolved from what we'd call traditional discount retailing, just being cheaper than everyone else, and moved to a hypermart where you're sort of like you've got increased product mix, food, and all of this, and which is one of the things it's actually known for now. Yes. And evolving into online retailing. How has that journey been, and how has the tech stack looked as you've proceeded on that journey? I think it's been quite dynamic. As I said, maybe historically, I wouldn't give the exact history. I probably wouldn't do it justice. But Naivas started in Nakuru town. Don't pin me on the exact specifics. But yes, it was a smaller retail shop when retail shops were coming up. Yeah. So family-based business, started a supermarket. Actually, it was more from a distributor perspective. You can supply that school, then you can actually sell to customers because you have better pricing, expanded to this next town. And the family owners at the time, the directors at the time, at this time now, had faith in themselves and said, you know what, let's venture into Nairobi. So they opened a store in Nairobi, the one in Ronangala. It's actually store number 2 on our list. And it caught on. And for a long time, it was Naivas Nairobi. And actually, at the time, it wasn't Naivas for markets. It was Naivasha self-service. And the trajectory of that and the success of that, being the acumen businessman that dared to open this kind of retail business, I think blew up. And at the time, I think Nakumat was there as Nakuru mattresses. So this was a ripe time for people to actually start visiting into supermarkets. So yes, you're correct in saying that we started as a company that offered best price. And today, I think that's still our tagline. Yeah. We still endeavor to have the best value for the customer. Yeah. Obviously, the dynamics have changed along the way. The customer wants and the customer needs have grown. So we moved from that one supermarket across many towns, opening new supermarkets. And the market has dictated that now you'd find the different formats that we do, we are geared more towards food. So we are actually now known as a Naivas food market. Because then we want to serve that customer end to end, mostly from a food perspective and giving you also your dry goods. So you'll find, yes, now we have less furniture in store, but more variety in your meat. Less, mattresses, but more in your flour and things like this. But I think at the heart of it also, as Naivas food markets, we don't necessarily sell just the product. We're not necessarily about just selling you the product at the cheapest price. We want to give you value. Because what we want to differentiate ourselves from the other supermarkets is that we sell a customer experience. And that has come to really prove value, because with the COVID situation and people starting to actually embrace online shopping, at some point, people still want to come to the supermarket because there's that experience you're giving a customer of the way the food market is laid out, what they're seeing in the supermarket, the touch and feel, just that comfort of you can actually come and have an experience is our biggest seller. And riding on that, we look at improving what we offer the customer, be it on the price, on the offers, or even just the variety. And we're expanding quite a bit also now to create that convenience. So we've moved from, I think when I joined, we were just about 25 going to 30 stores. We should hit 100 outlets by the end of this year.
Yeah. Wow. And retail has really exploded. And to your point earlier, I remember visiting one of your first redone food markets on Kiambu Road. And it gave a Sainsbury's feel. Like people actually took the time to design the experience inside and out.
Yes. And I think that was the pivot store.
Yeah.
The one in Kiambu Road at Seattle Mall.
Yeah.
I think that was an investment in how do we redefine our brand.
Yeah.
And I think that's the time we really pushed forward the Naivas food market sort of brand.
Yeah.
And it has taken hold, and you can see even our competitors now sort of adapting to it.
Yeah, it seems to be the standard model right now for smaller stores.
Yeah.
And so with all these changes, what does your tech stack look like?
I don't know. Sometimes it changes from day to day.
Yeah.
But we are primarily a Microsoft house, mostly because of the ERP is Microsoft. We run a Dynamics AX system. And I find that your major system dictates everything else around it. Yeah. So because of that, you find we run a lot of Microsoft products as a stack. Yeah. We've also come to a point where we have had the capacity and the skills internally to be able to adjust the core product, the off-the-shelf product. Yeah. So if you look at what is out of the box from Microsoft Dynamics as an ERP, we have put in work to localize it to the local market. Yeah. So the biggest example would be how you pay with your M-Pesa. Yeah. The adaptations and the technology we have put in place for you to have that customer experience. Yeah. And we also adaptive to it. I remember a few years back, there was a big row on somebody who shouted their phone number and somebody behind took it up and did some, public shaming with it. And at the end of the day, you do realize that as much as everyone is responsible for their own data, not getting into the technicality of that person's responsibility, at the end of the day, the buck still stops with the brand. Yeah. So it's up to us as the techies to come up with solutions to mitigate that. Yeah. So even from an M-Pesa example, now we have, I think, one of the leading solutions where we don't have any data ask. We come in, you send your M-Pesa, we do everything in the background, and on top of that, we award you loyalty points just off the fly. And I think that uptake by customers to see that we are concerned and making innovations to improve the experience really buys us a lot of loyalty. Yeah,
because it actually, speaking personally, the experience of actually having to shout out your number and then waiting
yes
because it's not being found.
Yeah.
Because I noticed, like in your stores, you actually give people the option to see if that's their contact and if that's their payment.
And I think the incentive there is, yes, you could have a very marginal point where I could pay the same amount with you around that time margin that we have. Yeah. But the incentive here is that because I am awarding you loyalty points against who's paying, then it's up to me to say, oh, no, that's not mine. Yeah. That was Faris's. Yeah. Otherwise, you'd be like, okay, fine, just go with it. But because I have an extra incentive, then it sort of closes the loop on that.
Yeah. And so the market is changing, as you pointed out, like a lot. You sort of have, you'll plan to open up a branch somewhere with market dynamics for that place in place. And then a competitor will probably have decided to do something similar. Like I look at Ngong Road as my typical example for how the Ngong Road Kilimani area. I grew up in that area. And around the year 2000, the junction finally came up. And there were around 6 supermarkets in that general area. It was one Chandarana, Nakuma, Tuchumi. That was it. Today, in that general area, we have around 30-something supermarkets.
Yes.
So you have that competitive pressure. You also have your customers expecting, okay, this other competitor is doing ABCD. We want a similar thing on the platform.
Yeah.
And then your business will have its own reporting requirements and how they want things done. And if you give the customer this feature, this other feature becomes difficult. And most recently, the government has come in with, like you mentioned, data protection. How do you balance all these competing interests and figure out, okay, what do we prioritize?
I think, like you said, the interests are many. And even just that footprint you've mentioned, the number of supermarkets that have come up is quite a lot. And you also notice you cannibalize from yourself also.
Yeah.
Because even in that area ourselves, we have at least 2 supermarkets that are walking distance from each other. Yeah. But I think the traditional slogan still stands. Customer is still king. So we try and be customer-centric. We try and say, let's build, what does the customer want? Really, from a very high life point of view, you're saying, if you give him convenience and you give him or her availability, that combined with affordability will definitely win you loyalty. Yeah. Affordability being that you have not only the best price for your end month shopping, but for your day-to-day shopping, which if you compare us and our competitors is something we strive to do. So we come and analyze and say, which is where our data analytics comes into play and says, what are the most frequent shopped things from a household perspective? What is your core basket? And we try and focus our discounts on that. So yes, every 2 or 3 months, we'll have a big offer on your fridges and your TVs and that. But on a day-to-day basis, we want to make sure that your core basket, you have affordability for that. And then we create convenience. Those locations when you come in, how is our store arranged? Is it appealing? Do you feel good just shopping there? And then over and above that, we try and strive for availability. That we don't want you to come and shop for 3 things and then walk into the next supermarket to buy the other 3 things. Once you come in, you've shopped, you're happy, you know where things are. When they go shopping with your children, they know, yes, this is there, this is that. Yeah. That kind of convenience and availability that we give you, I think stands us out from the competition. Yeah. But as you said, the retail market is also shrinking. Yeah. Because in that space, as much as Kilimani, I went to school there in primary also. Yeah. And looking at what it was where we used to walk back then and now, it's night and day. Yeah. As much as the population footprint has skyrocketed, the business market, the retail space is also still shrinking. So you'd find as much as other business goes, like Uchumi at the Hyper was a very popular branch, as much as it closed and didn't open, another 6 retail outlets have opened just to compete with that.
Actually, more the numbers are a bit mind-boggling.
Yes. Yeah. So it's an issue of buying loyalty from the customer. So if I, as Alex, know what I get from Naivas Prestige, then I'll always shop at Naivas Prestige. And us as Naivas, we try and say, okay, what is it that keeps you coming back? If we make sure it's affordable for you to come back day to day, it's convenient for you to come, and it's easy for you to pay, to in and out. Yeah. I think that really steps us out of that.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. And so there's just one more related question, which is, do you have varied core baskets for different locations? Because you have branches all over, like you have branches in Ruiru, branches in Riruta, branches in Lavington. Are all the baskets the same, or do you find that different stores have different?
Well, yes, all the stores have different, especially with location. So you'll find like in Mombasa, the basket would be different. If you go to Kapsabet, the basket would be different. And also just within where they are. So like you said, Ruiru could be very different from Thika Road in itself, just because of the location and the dynamics of people who live there. Yeah. So you'd find some like up country, like Kapsabets and like a lot of schools and institutions like shopping from us. Yeah. They get quality, they get it on time, they have assured of that availability. As much as you're serving the net, but the local Kapsabet person may prefer going to the market which they're used to for that two products. But we're also trying to entice them and say, we'll give you same price as good value with everything. So you don't have to stop buying your bread to go buy your sukuma wiki. It's all in this place.
Yeah.
So you're right in saying that the baskets are different, and we do try and tailor regional discounts so that then we appeal to different sort of segments. But we don't necessarily say that the shop at Karen is more expensive in beef than the shop in Thika Road. No. It might be the other way around. So we start at a normal standard for everyone and then say we would like to drive some objective in this particular area, so push a discount here or push a discount there.
Yeah. But also that brings into the complexity of the operation, because you have more or less standard prices across the country.
Yeah.
But it doesn't cost the same to get goods to that place, and they
Correct.
don't stay on the shelves for the same period. So certain types of stock might age out faster than others in certain areas, meaning you have to deliver them more frequently, which pushes up the cost of serving the customer in that region. How do you determine if a product just should not?
I think it's a day-to-day analysis, especially when you come to stock cover and dead stock. We run the advantage, I think, of having many branches. I think looking at the supermarket enterprise or supermarket business, there's always a tipping point. So you'll find me and you can open a business, have 3-4 shops, but running properly, fluently. Once you get to 5, maybe to 12, 15, we are struggling every day. But you get to a tipping point where maybe you have 20 branches, things sort of balance out. So that dead stock, if you do your analysis properly and in good time, would have somewhere to go where it's moving more than the other. And we also have a lot of supplier support. So you'd find a lot of upcountry things are actually transported by the suppliers themselves because they have regional hubs. So you'd find our Kisumu branch may not be served 80% by the Nairobi warehouse. A lot of things come from Nakuru. But you'll find also some interesting things like cooking oil comes from Mombasa, most of it, the Pwani oils and the likes. So they warehouse things for all their customers. So we come that. But logistics is a challenge on its own, especially across this country and just the network of it. I was comparing notes with colleagues who run systems in UK for supermarkets, the Sainsbury's and stuff. They're like, for them, logistics is not something they consider. It's a given. So the amount of stock they hold in one branch is almost nil. So a truck comes in, everything that came in is offloaded right to the shelf. Here, we can't do that. Here, just based on where we are in the logistics of our space, you need to find buffers in that. So we really need to accommodate for shrinkage along that logistic travel. But because, again, we are trying still to be customer-centric. So you really can't push back that cost all the way to the customer. So there has to be a balance between you, the person who's supplying you. So you'd find we probably would push for rebates for things that Capsabet is selling as opposed to things that, Junction would be selling. Just so that then we can guarantee a better pricing for the person in Capsabet as opposed to just skyrocketing that cost. And the suppliers really understand this, and they also want to push their brands. They want their brand to also be known in those rural areas and pick up traction for that, because for them also it's a volume game.
And also if another brand actually penetrates, then it's more money on marketing.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
In a quick-changing retail market where customer experience is key, staying ahead of industry disruption means innovating as fast and as often as consumer expectations and technologies evolve. Reimagining retail means reimagining IT. From the warehouse to the point of sale, back office to storefront, online, and every touchpoint in between. Those delivering exceptional omni-channel experiences in a multi-channel world are the ones running on intelligent digital infrastructure. Bridging legacy and next-generation technologies to integrate and secure complex ecosystems, connect with customers meaningfully, engage with store associates efficiently, and operate exceptionally across any device, any app, any cloud. When it's time to reshape their shopper's journey, retailers rely on a proven leader with 20 years experience transforming, optimizing, and securing the world's retail IT infrastructure, including 10 out of the top 10 global retail brands. Where could an intelligent digital foundation take your business next?
Welcome back to the Pure Infrastructure Podcast. Today we have Alex Karanja, who's the head of digital transformation at Naivas Supermarkets. So we kind of covered the technical bits, but you touched on the fact that your team is growing, like obviously supporting all the tech and the various platforms that you have requires people. And you are implementing Microsoft products, and they've been famous for sort of cleaning up our tech industry.
Yeah.
How do you retain talent in a market which is increasingly expensive?
Okay. I think, like you said, the talent is shrinking, but I think one of the biggest advantages or strategies that we have taken is that we don't do as much in-house dev as you would imagine. A lot of tech that we do is always an extension of our systems. So it's improving on our current or probably adapting a customer request that coming from a commercial side of things, but it's really a customer request. A customer would like to do ABCD. Therefore, the commercial pipeline generates an idea and then we adapt to it. So in a sense, our ERP really stands on its own. And the tech that we have from a development perspective is really extensions of that. Now, we've, over the years, noticed that recruiting internally has the biggest benefit because the tech is half the story. You need to know retail. You need to be in an environment where you have that experience. As much as you would be seated in a basement somewhere, I think most IT guys sit in a basement somewhere. You need, if you're talking to a solution that the customer at the till will have, you need to have that experience of having been at a store and experiencing what that cashier does, what that cashier supervisor does, what that customer service person does, what it would take for a manager to resolve a particular technical problem at that particular point where the customer is irritated, is agitated about something that at the end of the day is a tech problem, and that cashier really had no input on how to solve it. So a lot of recruitment we do is internally. You find up the chain, you'd be surprised the technical knowledge that people have inside your company. All the way from people who just do back office entries. I think when we run like HR recruitment drives just to get knowledge of who we have in the company, you have people with degrees in electrical engineering who you never really made use of before. And you find at the place they are positioned at that branch, you needed somebody to do something technical on ground, and they volunteered, and that was that. So a lot of recruitment we do is internally. Once we pick that up internally, because you already have the experience, we're not teaching you the retail experience. Yeah. So we come up now and say, okay, fine, let's train you on the tech side of things, how the systems work, not from how you see them from a customer and supplier perspective, but how they actually work internally. And then now we build on that to give you the training and the specific. Obviously, by the time we're filtering that out, you need to have some dev experience, some database management experience from an education perspective. But once we bring that in, I find it easier to sort of spread the technical work across such people as opposed to going out and hiring somebody who worked in a bank on day one. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, you still need those kind of people, because if you have expanded and you have 10 more servers than you had yesterday, you still need somebody with experience and discipline to come and say, this is the kind of documentation you need to run these servers. This is the kind of, education and technical expertise you need to run this kind of industry specs. So yes, we do still get people from outside to do that. But I think our largest effect by the Microsoft developers shrink has not been as much because the development we do is really niche in that. And we tend to outsource projects to companies who are now suffering that crunch. But we tend to outsource a lot of projects in that sense. So this is the spec, you go build that. When you come in, what we focus on is the integration into our systems and making sure it passes all audit levels and it's supportable internally.
Yeah.
But yes, I think as the brand has grown, as our outlets have grown, there's also been pressure for us to recognize that, as a tech team, we also need to grow, and it's something I think that has over time, maybe more recently than most, come to light with the management of the company. That as much as we're expanding, you also need to expand that technical team, because again, in most companies, tech is usually considered a very big cost budget. But I think just realizing how much the company relies on day-to-day tech also informs that yes, you need people to support that team, so that they don't end up doing the crazy night shifts that we used to do. You're there solving the battleground. As much as it was fun in doing, I think at that scale now, it needs to balance out.
It's fun when you're younger and made of rubber.
To be in the trenches was good. But I think that problem solving has always sort of guided me in whatever position I've played, even in this company. I think a lot of lessons I've learned coming all the way from the impact side of things, the stint I had with the legal team, showed me that, as much as we like innovation, as much as we are digitally transforming things, we also need to be very pragmatic about things, because the business has to run. It can't jump 3 years of progression just because that idea was announced. So taking a good example, you see, like now we have ChatGPT and everyone is hyping. What are you doing? And a question I get asked recently a lot is, what are you doing with AI in your company? But it should be progressive. It's not something we need to jump into a business. Yes, personal projects and things, do the experimenting, do the sandbox, but we can't really flip a business about just because we want to implement the latest technology.
Well, and I understand that, and which ties in perfectly with my next question, which was, your official title is Head of Digital Transformation, which has become an overly used word. Like everyone, is talking about digital transformation in government, in business, etc. What do you interpret as the meaning of digital transformation, and what does that translate to in your job on a daily basis?
Yes, I think it is a buzzword, and I think maybe coincidentally that title was on purpose, just to sort of build that buzz that we need also to have outside recognition and outside cooperation and partnerships with other things. But I think for me personally, looking at digital transformation as a title is to say, we need to move from analog to digital, so to speak. So in many companies, ours included, we have a lot of paperwork. And paperwork dictates how you've done things for eons. As much as the dynamics changed, our stores are now more colorful, more appreciated to look like, but some of the processes we run are still led by the paper that was run when we were a very small supermarket. So for me, I think there's a professor who put it out and said, you need to digitalize, and then digital transform. So my understanding of that is, one, let's get rid of the paper as much as we possibly can, as progressively as we can. If we get rid of the paper and now you have digitally accessible data, the supplier who brought this particular delivery, if I can be able to capture that information at the point where they delivered, it's not somebody crossing off a tick and giving it out to another person and another person who will then capture it. If I can capture it at that point, I have access to a new data point that I didn't have before. It may save hours in employee time, yes, but it also influences a change in the thinking of how that data is used and when it is used. And once we do that, then I guess we move on to the digitalization, where now we are changing the process, because we are influencing not just our own company. Because now, if I run with that example of the receiving, it means I also influence how the supplier does his things. He has to have proper documentation that comes with things. He can't no longer write things down with a pen. He also has to invest in something like that. So we also influence the digitalization part of the supplier, our partners. And collaboratively, then we both change our business model, because then at that point, then you're transforming the business based on the digital data that you have. So one, if we move away from paper, you have data access points, which can be analyzed. It then influences how you do your processes. You realize, this thing doesn't actually need to be done this way. it used to be done this way traditionally because of A, B, C, D. But if you capture the data at point A, then you introduce a process E, which takes care of, C, D, E. And the value of that is also looking at data at that particular point. So if you capture it there, you're able to, and then down the road, then we transform, we change how the business model itself, all the way down to maybe strategy of what the director of the business owner will be looking at, because he also sees new possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that perfectly sums it up. So like, just to paraphrase it, like you have your traditional manual process.
Yes.
You move that to a digital process. But at this point, you're just capturing data.
Just capturing data.
Then the final stage is deriving insights and acting on the insights that you've gathered from that data.
Yes. So once you gather insights from that data, then it influences how you actually do business.
Yeah.
You change your whole business model
Yeah.
based on information that now you already have. Because before you were really operating
in the dark.
by your own personal experience.
Yeah.
Now you have the advantage of these insights to guide your decision. Yeah. I think it also makes you more bolder in what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so one of the other questions I was going to ask is, there's been a lot of money going to startups sort of in this retail space.
Yes.
And adjacent to it and fintech. But, we actually think the first unicorn we got on the continent was a retail operation. Mm-hmm. Some of these companies have crashed. Some of them are ambling along. Some have shrunk. And obviously, all of this is competition to you, in a way.
Yes, directly, yes.
What's your view on the market landscape in Kenya in retail, and what does the future hold?
I think the market is still quite wide. Given what you'd call the middle class society still getting there, it's getting wider and wider, and really that's the biggest pool. And I think a lot of investments by PE firms and startups have focused more on what you'd term as general trade. So the likes of Twiga, Masoko, the copiers, their model is improve the supply chain for the local retailer to be able to have better availability and better products for you as a customer. Now, I think it does have a direct competition, because then it makes me, as a local consumer, shop more from my local kiosk, because then the thing I was going to get from my supermarket, I can now get it here. But I think still they won't reach a point where you'd compete with what is known as modern trade, where you actually have a supermarket sort of feel. More so just for that convenience. The availability still, it won't be there. And you'd still want to have that one-time shopping, especially because we still run good big brands for the things that you're buying. But I think the competition will always be there. I think now we are seeing the biggest competition is not necessarily even from those startups. It's from distributors who are opening wholesale shops. Because the way the economy is, you want to feel, okay, I can buy bulk on my last weekend of the month. It'll last me maybe 3 months. That distributor is having a better sale point based on his volumes back to the supplier. But again, he's also only offering a certain limited number of items. So what we're trying to do in competing for that is we give you value in a wider discount range of products that you can consume and feel, yes, I still had value and I didn't have to spend a large amount of money at the same time. Because currently, I think from previous discussions, even money is coming in, trickling in week after week. Somebody's paying you your debt today, as opposed to when traditionally LPOs were paid on the day. So we want to assure our customers that you can spread your value and still get the same amount of savings you would have done. Yeah. But the market, I think, will change, especially online shopping has really now taken a grip of our country. The convenience is there. So it'll also force us as Naivas and as supermarkets that are here to blend in. So you find now we give you extra options. So yes, there are days you'd want to come to the supermarket and shop and have that feel, but there are days you just want online shopping for your regular basket. So if we can come to a point where we give you best of both worlds, because the online will only give you one, and the traditional will give you this. We have the capacity to give you both. You trust the brand, you trust what you buy, you trust that the price will always going to be predictable. And then now we offer online shopping and delivery for that. So the day you want that, we have that for you. And then I think that's the future for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the final question is just, what does the future hold for you and your career?
I think, well, let's put it this way. The current role I have, which I got in beginning of this year, moved me away from traditional IT operations management. And in a very big sense, it's something I'd wanted for a long time. Because it gives me probably a dream job. I probably, in a very utopia kind of way, would wake up, do some research, sell the idea to my management, get a sandbox, get a funding for that, validate the idea, and then push the business forward. That on a day-to-day would be a grand job.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are the day-to-day things that I still need to handle. But the fact that I don't have necessarily the weight that I've carried maybe over the last 7 years to run and be concerned about day-to-day activities.
Keeping the lights on.
Exactly, keeping the lights on. In fact, in many places I used to introduce myself, I'm Naivas in tech, I keep the lights on. Now I've passed the baton to somebody else to do that. And I've taken up a role where of the cream that I had wanted, the things I really wanted to focus on that distracted me for this is now I have the opportunity to run with them. And one of those, as much as is customer innovations, things that I would like to improve as you as a customer. I meet people and say, oh, you work for Naivas, you're a good company. I like Naivas better than this other shop, but I would like ABCD. That is my value. If I collect one or two of those things and roll it out every other quarter, then if I increase the customer satisfaction by quarter of maybe, those 200-300 people, then as much as we expand, you feel I have brought in loyalty.
Yeah.
But underlying that, I think personally for me, is to focus on data analytics. When I joined Naivas, and I think the pivoting point for me to actually join Naivas as an employee at that time, maybe 7 years ago, was that Naivas is the biggest, or rather a retail enterprise, is the biggest source of data you could have. We run maybe, 200,000 customers now on a daily basis. Those are 200,000 transactions that have the potential to give you insights on a lot of things. And I think that's the focus I want to build on. And I came across something called IBCSS. It really spoke to me. It's International Business Reporting Standards or Communication Standards. So a debate I've had with a lot of my peers is on analytics and the flashy, which software to use, what to project with. But at the end of the day is, who are you communicating to? So we find a lot of infographics now. It tells you this is the rice growers of China. This is the best petroleum producers around the world. Fancy, very engaging on social media, on YouTube, and people presenting very interesting things. And it's quite good for that kind of audience. But I look at it in terms of, if I was to look at this from a business, if it's my managing director who's looking at this on a daily basis, it'll get old in the first 7 days. So what I'm looking at is focusing to come up with, probably be the first to come and say we have actionable standards of reports. If my team says we went to this department and they want this kind of report, the output would be something that is actionable. It just doesn't give them the historical data. It gives them impetus to make a decision and action on it. So that's the kind of target I want to set, not only for my team, but for myself personally, to see if I can influence that, not just in our company, but in this local industry that we have.
That's actually quite interesting. So it's basically you will go in with some of the insights already gleaned, with basically a path for them to act on.
Yes.
Any last comments?
Not much, but I think a very big thank you for hosting me on this. I think it's been a long time coming.
Yes.
And yes, I think retail industry is a gold mine. As much as they say, I think data is the new gold, I think retail defines every other business that we have. And at the scale that we have, I think even me, myself, it overwhelms me just to think about it. A good example is every time we have auditors, and auditors or rather our biggest customers are banks and insurance. So when they come and say, we need this kind of data broken down over this period, you show them the amount of data that request actually translates to. Even they change their processes.
Yeah.
So I think we have also helped them, define how to audit retail companies.
Yeah.
But I think the playground for me is data has always been a passion of mine, and playing around with it and being on problem solving to be able to give insights and have that person looking at it, not necessarily even to make the report. It's to provide a platform where that CFO or that MD can look at it and appreciate and say, oh yes, that's an insight I didn't have before.
Yeah.
Or even, come to a point where 2 months later they can say, Alex, this report of yours is nice. I've used it for a month. Now make ABCD changes. To me, that is success. Because he has looked at it, understood it, consumed the data, and actually knows what he needs more out of it. So for me, that is what we want to do.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex, for making the time. This has been one of the most exhaustive episodes we've had, and I've learned a lot from you on how retail works. So thanks again, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks.